What's up everybody? Today we're going to talk tow builds for 6.0 Powerstrokes, and we're getting started right now. Layout of the video is going to be, first we're going to talk about suspension work. It's not a big topic, but it is one that I think we should really take a look at. Next, we're going to get into some electronic stuff, things that take place inside the cab. The next category is going to be what most of you guys are actually interested about, and that's going to be engine modifications, upgrades I think you should really consider for your tow build. Last, we're going to go into some special considerations I think people should look into. Probably isn't going to be a big topic, but one I think you should take a nice look at. Again, some of this might be more creature comforts, not so much big upgrades for your tow build. So the first thing we're going to talk about is suspension. What suspension upgrades do I recommend? I do want to say, for those of you guys that want a big lifted truck to tow, I don't recommend towing with more than a 4-inch lift, and preferably no more than a 2.5-inch level. The next part of this video is talking about people running larger than factory tires for towing purposes. This next part will make a lot of sense once you get into it. A special consideration with those is that you should really consider re-gearing your truck. If you're talking over 10,000 pounds towing, you might want to consider a re-gear on your axles to help put your truck back close to the factory final drive ratio. At highway speeds is where you're really going to notice that final drive ratio really kind of stinks when you have big tires and you're still in the factory gear settings. A set of 430s, 410s, depending on 35, 37-inch tires, depending on your lift, is really going to help pull you back to where you want to be as far as like just making the truck tow overall well. What you'll find is these are issues you can't really fix with tuners or bigger injectors. Bigger turbos actually exacerbate that issue pretty considerably. Now, we did talk about the lift. I do like my truck setup, so I have a little bit more rake in the rear of the truck. Not crazy, but like an extra inch, maybe 2, is reasonable with the airbags aired down. 20 to 25 is perfect for my camper setup. Some guys don't like the airbag setup, in which case I will say getting a set of fresh 350 springs. These 6 liters are getting older. Getting a set of new leaf springs in the rear is going to really help balance that out. Get the 350 springs. You'll be very happy with that as far as towing capacity. It does make the ride a little more stiff, but these are 3/4 ton pickup trucks. They're not going to drive absolutely amazing to begin with. Last thing, not really a suspension part, but brakes. Make sure you have good brakes. I really like the towing series from PowerStop. They're reasonably priced. I've had excellent success with them as far as increasing the stopping performance. I also get a fresh set of brake lines on your truck too if they're older and haven't been replaced already, because they're probably going to fail in the near future anyway. So I have braided stainless lines on this. They're getting older. I'll probably change them out again in the near future just to be on the safe side. Now, some interior stuff we want to talk about. First is going to be tuners. I do recommend a nice custom tow tune. Shout out to the guys over at Blessed Performance. Code 6.0 Bros for 10% off your custom tunes from those guys. I am a big fan of them. I've run their tunes in the past. We're going to be reviewing them on the channel in the near future. Again, affiliate code 6.0 Bros for 10% off your custom tunes from those guys. The next thing, and this is going to be vital, especially on the 6 liter, I recommend a good quality monitoring option. I use the Edge CTS2 on my truck. It's obviously the older model. They're on the 3 now. Very similar. The 3 is just kind of an evolution of that product line. I also have an EGT probe on this. That's super important. Those guys of you out there towing really heavy especially. I did put a boost gauge in this. I'll put a link to that video of how I added a external boost gauge. And it runs right through the CTS. It's super seamless. A little extra work, but very happy with how that turned out overall. This will let you keep an eye on oil temps, coolant temps. It also will help you let you know if your oil cooler is failing prior to being on a 600-700 mile road trip with your camper, which is the last place you want to be finding out you have a failed oil cooler. There's a lot of other things about monitoring. Again, I can link a video down in the description below that talks more about monitoring and what to look for with your truck outside of just this. We're going to stick to just the tow build and things I like to add. Now for the last thing, and probably the thing you guys, I bet I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of you guys skipped through the rest of it and jumped right to this part. That's going to be performance. What are the hard parts we're going to change out on this truck to help make this one a super reliable tow truck and give us the kind of performance we're looking for to compete with a lot of the modern day diesels out there? And honestly, you don't need to change anything. They are perfect from factory. Tow and move. All right, kidding aside, we're gonna start with a mild build, what I recommend for most people, which is really not changing out a whole lot of parts. There are upgrades I really like, and I think they do add to the performance and fuel economy of the truck, but they're not major things you're gonna change. I'm gonna do a part 2 to this video where it's more of a tow street truck build, where we get into turbos and injectors. But for this truck, what we're gonna talk, well, not this truck. For this build series, what we're gonna first start with is keep your factory turbo, keep your factory injectors. Don't mess with any of that stuff. They tow really well with a tow tune. You're gonna get great reliability. Your EGTs are gonna run really cool. What do I actually recommend changing out though? Intercooler pipes is one of the first ones. You're not gonna see crazy gains from this. It's super easy to do. SoCal Billet has a really nice set. No Limit Fab has a really nice set. Those are my two companies I recommend. Check out my turbo sponsor down below. They sell SoCal Billet intercooler pipes. Go hit those guys up for those parts. That's what I would recommend on a 6-liter. We'll be changing out in this truck in the near future. All aluminum intercoolers are essential in my opinion. Again, I did say intercooler pipes, but getting rid of the plastic hot side, one of the dumbest things Ford continues to do even in the new trucks, but getting rid of that plastic nonsense, get a nice metal pipe in there that's not gonna blow, and good quality intercooler boots. But going to a all aluminum intercooler is also an upgrade. The factory one has plastic end caps. They're known to blow. These trucks are getting older, so those out there that still have the plastic end caps, they're going to blow sooner or later. Best get that out of there and upgrade to a nicer unit. I'll have some budget affiliate links down below for factory size but aluminum end tanks on it, so I'll have those links down below for you to check out. CSF is always a great option in my book. They do have a higher one now that I think they don't really sell a lot of the 6028s. They've moved on to a different one, but I'll find some solid options, link those down below. The next part we're going to talk about is going to be manifolds. Yes, both of them. Intake and exhaust manifolds on these trucks. We're going to start with exhaust manifolds. It's a shorter topic. So BD is what you guys should be buying. They're reasonably priced and they're super high quality. I've put mine through the ringer. These have seen quarter-mile pulls at 17, knocking on 1800 degree temps with this truck. They've been through some pretty significant back pressures. I know I've had boost on this. I didn't have the back pressure sensor set up, but boost, I've done almost 50, or no, I've done a little over 50 PSI on this turbo. I'm probably beating the crap out of that turbo, but shout out to Turbo Time because it's still holding together perfectly fine. They also come pre-set up to put your EGT probe in. Intake manifold upgrades. ODOG has cornered the market on these things. Excellent product. I run an ODOG. Get the S2R. I know a lot of people are out there looking for the S3R that's not around anymore due to EPA regulations, but the S2R flows just as much air, so it's not like you're downgrading. It has all the EGR provisions. You don't have to worry about getting any trouble or hassle for that stuff. It's a great piece, and it really evens out airflow from the front and rear cylinders. The factory intake manifold is meant to be mass produced. It is very restrictive. The ODOG is just a much nicer piece. I have videos on some tips and tricks on installing that, but again, just a great quality product. I love mine. This will also help with faster spool up, drop your exhaust temps, help get more efficiency out of the truck as a whole as well. I then recommend getting an exhaust system for this. So I run a full 4-inch off the turbo all the way back. What I'm recommending for you guys that are doing towing builds, get a 3.5-inch downpipe to a 4-inch out the back. Couple reasons for this. One, it's gonna have much nicer fitment. The 4-inch, it barely fits in there. A lot of times it's rubbing on the cab and stuff. The factory downpipe is only about 3 inches, so I don't recommend that. Get the added flow of a 3.5-inch and then 4-inch off your downpipe out the back is my preferred setup for towing. That 3.5-inch downpipe, while it gives you better flow, it doesn't decrease back pressure as much as the 4-inch does. When you get a 4-inch, you're actually gonna really be able to notice that you lose a little at the very bottom end of your RPM. Why you care about that towing is because that's kind of your spool up, that's part of your cruising boost level, so you're gonna need to actually push the turbo a little harder to maintain speed in the same way, whereas with that 3.5-inch downpipe, it is just ideal for you guys out there towing. That is my recommendation. Now, the most controversial upgrade I will tell anybody to ever do on a 6-liter pickup is the air intake. Yes, insert everybody out there that says don't get rid of the factory intake. It's the greatest thing ever. You can support 1,000 horsepower on the factory intake. Ugh, we've heard it. Hot air intakes. It's ridiculous. Anyway, what I will say about this is for this level build though, you guys really don't need to look at upgrading. The factory intake actually does do a good job. It has the highest degree of filtration. You can borderline ignore that filter for a long period of time before replacing it. Don't do that, guys. Replace your filters at reasonable intervals. But the factory one does hold a lot of dirt. You guys in like sandy or dusty environments, it really is probably your best bet, especially at this build, because you're not going to really gain a whole lot of efficiency or increase in power going to an aftermarket intake system. The aftermarket intake system at this build gets you a little noise and it looks nicer. And what I mean by noise is you hear the turbo a little better, but who doesn't love that turbo? And it does require a fair amount more maintenance. You have to replace that or clean it a lot more frequently than the factory setup. No limit intake makes a really cool one. I'm about to test out one of those cheap eBay pipes with an AFE filter to see how that does on my truck, because this filter, this S&B is not able to really supply enough air for the setup. Now I know what everyone's gonna say, that's a hot air intake. I hate this so much. A couple things. One, heat soak is a real thing. You are on a long trip, that entire intake tube becomes hot air because it is sitting in a hot engine bay. Now, a couple things. One, you also heat your air up as you compress it through your turbocharger. And two, you have air coming in this entire front end. In there, going through your engine bay. That's what cools your radiator, that's what cools your intercooler, your AC condenser, all those things, fresh air from the outside. I've done some very mild testing of like driving down the highway at cruising speeds in some of these trucks. I think it was my 6.7 I did it in. I haven't gotten to test it in the 6 liter yet. But the takeaway here is I saw like a 1 degree temperature difference cruising down the highway. There were some more differences cruising around town. Now last, and this is going to be a quick short topic, special considerations I think you guys should look into. One of which is going to be a transmission pan. I'm a big fan of doing one of the deep dish. I have a BD in my 6 liter. Mag High-Tech makes a really nice one that I'm actually a bigger fan of. I like the Mag High-Tech stuff, though I'm very biased. But you're gonna get that thicker flange. Go get a 6.4 filter for your 6 liter and that deep pan. That's how they fit together, otherwise they don't fit. And that should be your upgrade for that. It's going to help filter the fluid better. It's going to provide a little bit of increased cooling for your transmission. The 5R has a lot of like torsional flexion, which is kind of, think of bending in this way, where the front's kind of going this and the back's this. It's a longer transmission, which as they get bigger, this is something I have. I have a lot of upgrades to prevent this and fix this issue. That's where some shift flares come into play. But with that, the Mag High-Tech pan or similar styles really do help with that. They don't fix everything, but they do help kind of add a little bit of preventative maintenance. And again, you get a little bit more fluid in there, a little bit more cooling to your whole setup. I'm a big fan of those in this application. You could also consider upgrading the transmission cooler. The 6 liter actually has one in the radiator and a external transmission cooler. You could upgrade the external one. The other thing we kind of touched on earlier, and that is with lifts and stuff and tire size. Like realistically, think about what your truck's doing, because the more mass you have, like I have 35 12.5s on this truck. They're big tires. I used to have about the same height tire on it, but it was closer to like a factory width, and that was decent for towing. But even on that, with the factory gearing, I could tell it was kind of getting away from my efficiency, and it made certain parts of towing not as fun. So at certain highway speeds, I either had to be like speeding really bad for it to kind of cruise with the turbo, or I had to be winding a gear out to be where I wanted to for like the drivability I was looking for. It was really easy to lug that setup down, and realistically it had more to do with my tire size. I was running a bigger turbo. That will play into effect as well. The biggest issue I had to deal with my axle gearing. 373 is the factory gear on a 250. I think it was actually the only option on the 250 back then. 410s would put a 35 very close to that factory gear ratio. That's what I would probably upgrade to if I choose to stay on 35s. I'll probably go to 410s at some point. So just something to consider. I want to throw these special considerations in there. Also, I do like the 08 style tow mirrors. They are a little better for towing. You get a lot more visibility out of them, but they're definitely not needed. And lastly, headlights. Make sure you got a good set of headlights, nice bright low and high beams, so you can actually see. Don't set them to blind other drivers, but just so you can see. Those are kind of all around things I recommend for your 6-liter. Thank you everybody for watching. If you made it to the end, don't forget to show my turbo sponsor, even though I did not talk about turbo upgrades, Turbo Time USA, 6.0 Bros for 10% off. That is an affiliate link, but those guys are supporters of the channel, love them. Again, Blessed Performance for your tuning needs right now, 6.0 Bros for 10% off his custom tunes. Stay tuned for the second video where we'll actually get into like more of a tow street build, more of what this truck spent most of its life actually doing, where we were towing with bigger injectors, bigger turbos, and what my recommendations are going to be for that, and where I think you should really consider no longer towing, depending on what you want power-wise, at what I think that limit should be for you guys. So stay tuned, that'll be a fun video to make. A lot of the same upgrades we talked about here will carry over into that build. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next upload.